everyone's enjoying lunch. My name is Katie Dover-Taylor. I'm the head of adult services at the Westland Public Library, and I'm super honored to welcome all of you to this edition of the Lunchtime Conversation series. This series is organized by the city's DEI department, led by C. Pascal Eze. I'm happy to see so many familiar and friendly faces out there in the audience. Also here with us today is a remarkable speaker, Fox 2 News anchor Roop Raj. I've heard tell that Roop's keynotes come with a wow factor, so no pressure. So just like you, I can't wait for Raj to take us on a journey to discuss the important theme of overcoming your next challenge. But before Roop comes on stage in the next 15 minutes or so, we'll have the Davis twin sisters sing the national anthem. If you can stand, please do so. Please join me now in welcoming the Davis sisters on stage for the national anthem. Thank you.
Another round of applause for the Davis sisters, please. It is now my honor to invite on stage the mayor of this great city, Mayor Kevin Coleman, who has been a tremendous support to our work here at the DEI department. Please join me in welcoming Mayor Coleman.
Good morning, everybody. Thanks for being here. And welcome to City Hall for Westland's Lunchtime Conversation with Mr. Roop Raj and Westland's Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion team. Roop Raj is a perfect example of this topic in action, from starting his own TV show at age 14 to going on to headlining TED 2019 in Detroit as a keynote speaker, to interviewing presidential candidates in 2020, as well as years of hosting Let It Rip on Fox 2 News. We all know Roop Raj, and he undoubtedly has stories of overcoming challenges within his own career. And within my career, I've overcame many challenges as well. I've lost elections, I've won elections, I've had to make really hard, tough decisions. That's part of this job. And regardless of the outcome, I was driven to rise up and continue in order to take on my next challenge, and I continue to do that every day. And here at Westland City Hall, we value learning from others. And this lunchtime conversation is an excellent opportunity to continue to do so. So lastly, I want to thank our Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Director, Mr. Pascal Easy. Let's give him a round of applause, please. And I want to thank his team as well that's here today. Thank you. We appreciate the hard work. And I want to thank you all for coming. So give yourselves a round of applause for being here. And I really look forward to this conversation. It's just great to see such a great turnout today. Thank you all for being here. But before I get off stage, I want to invite Roop to come up. I have something special for you, sir. In appreciation of you being here and taking your time, I want to present you with a certificate of recognition on behalf of the City of Westland.
Thank you.
For you.
So nice. You get a picture of that.
You know, let's step forward and take.
Wanna do
Craig,
another one?
Craig. Sorry, let's get one more picture. I was kind of hiding back there.
Thank you so much. This is great.
Appreciate you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
What a
Thanks for
pleasure.
being
Thank
here.
you, Mayor.
Yeah.
This is awesome. Wow, this is so good to be back in Westland. And I say back because I grew up coming to Westland as a kid. The Indian American community is pretty tight, especially when people move not knowing anyone who looks like them in the 70s to America. My parents quickly made friends with people who came from the same parts of India as they did. And one of the first Indian Americans in all of Metro Detroit who came here on a boat in the 1950s was right down the road in Westland. And Dr. Prasad is someone who we loved and adored. He actually ran for office. He was one of the first people I ever met who was Indian American who ran for public office. He was running for a city council seat. He didn't make it back in the 90s, but just a good man. And so my memories of being here in Westland date back to the early 1980s. And so when I got to come back to Detroit and become a news anchor in 2009, I was so excited when I would get to go to these areas and go back to these areas where I grew up going to, right? Because I remember the backyard. I was a really mischievous kid. And so I remember hiding people's coats and doing all kinds of stuff when there was time to leave because I didn't want people to leave. And so I would do all kinds of stuff. But I'll tell you what, we're here today to talk about overcoming adversity. And your story is just as important and significant as anyone who stands up on this stage. And each and every one of you has a story of overcoming adversity, overcoming a difficulty. But I'm going to take you to a couple different points in my life. And in this short speech here today, visit these places and come on a field trip with me so we can talk about the lessons learned from those places that I landed. I mentioned that my parents moved to Metro Detroit in 1983. I grew up in Indiana, and I looked around as a little boy who was a brown-skinned, bowl-cut, black-haired kid growing up in Marion, Indiana, and I never saw anybody who looked like me. And so I, at a very early age, wanted to become a television anchor. But there was something that stood in the way, and I'll never forget the moment where I realized how big that thing was that stood in the way. And it wasn't me being Indian American. It was something else. And I'll never forget sitting in that chair, shaking in this cold chair as I sat there in the third grade. And I remember very clearly shaking not because the chair was cold and I was wearing shorts, but rather because the clock was going to hit 2:15. And I knew every Wednesday at 2:15 what would happen. And sure enough, like any Wednesday at 2:15, the knock at the door. And as I looked through the big brown door with the small glass pane, there she was, with her long curly brown hair and her big blue eyes. She looked at me and said, "Roop, are you ready?" And I said, "As ready as I'll be." And I used to always say that, "As ready as I'll be." And so I went through that door, walked down a hall, sat in a conference room, and this repeated every single week for all of the third grade until it was fixed, until it was done. And I waited and hoped that it would be done because, you see, my dream was to be a television news anchor, not in New York, not in Chicago, not in San Francisco, not in Boston, but in Detroit, the greatest news town that ever will be. The town where Bill Bonds graced the airwaves, Diana Lewis graced the airwaves, a town where Rich Fisher and Sherry Margolis and Murray Feldman and Huel Perkins, my mentor, where all of these men and women grace the airwaves. All of these folks had offers to go other places, but they would always come back to Detroit, including Bill Bonds, who, by the way, went to New York and went to LA, and that's the most talented newsman you would have ever met. I mean, him and Huel are right up there. And he was kind of booted out of New York, booted out of LA, came back to Detroit, because Detroit is that great of a news market. And no, it's not because of the crime. I resent that. It's not because of the crime. No, it's because of the people. The people in this town love their sports, they love their community, they love their food, they love their neighbors, and they want to know what's going on. We're busybodies, we're nosy people, Detroiters, aren't we? Did you hear what happened, right? And so Detroit is the greatest news market. We are the 13th largest TV market in the country. There are 289 or 300 TV markets in the country. Alpena is one of the smallest. I was in New Orleans before I came here 15 years ago. That was market 48. Flint, before I went to New Orleans, I was in Flint. That was market 64. And I started in Lansing, Michigan, which was market 108. And so they pay like really small money in small markets. But what stood in the way was that day, what I realized in that day where I was shaking in the chair, I realized how big the obstacle really was. And as the woman who I saw every week in that conference room helped me, she looked at me and squared in the eye and says, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" And I said, "I want to be a television news anchor." Now, mind you, I had big glasses. I actually broke my nose when I was a little boy, so my nose until I was 15 was crooked, with one nostril bigger than the other. My voice didn't change until, I think it was 6 months ago, maybe 8 months ago. And so I was a late bloomer, so to speak. I was shorter than the other kids, had the bushy, big black hair, and it reminded me of that kid from Marion, Indiana, who, when I looked around, never saw anybody who looked like me, who felt like me. And I thought that was one of the greatest injustices and one of the worst things to happen to me. But what I didn't realize is that was one of the biggest gifts that had ever happened to me, was facing that kind of adversity. Now, you're probably wondering what happened in that room once a week, every Wednesday at 2:15. Well, you see, I had a speech impediment. I couldn't pronounce my S's or my T's. So on top of my broken nose, my silly haircut, which I think was kind of cute, and my speech, I couldn't speak. So I remember teachers would look at me and say, "You want to be a television news anchor?" And I'd say, "Yeah." And they say, "Well, how are you going to do it if you can't speak properly?" And they challenged me, and many of the teachers challenged me, I think, out of good intentions, a couple of them out of bad intentions. I will never name them, but they know who they are. And by the way, they hit me up on Facebook. "I'm so proud to see you on television." I'm like, "But you were mean. You weren't even nice to me." That's not true. But the bottom line is, when I sat in that room in the 3rd grade, I realized that that was a huge impediment. Think about it with the word, when you tell a kid he has a speech impediment. The word impediment, what does that mean? It means a big blockade put in your way, and you can't move past it. So my mom and dad, who moved here in 1973, I don't know how many of you know Indian American families. Raise your hand if you know an Indian American family. Ask them what their sons and daughters should do, and they'll tell you doctor or engineer. So the reason people move to Detroit is because you're going to work at DMC, or you're going to work at General Motors or Chrysler or Stellantis or wherever. And so I was not only facing rejection from myself because I couldn't get my speech right, and I finally got it right in the 4th grade. And I was also facing rejection from the Indian American community. So I had another impediment, not the speech impediment alone, but I had an impediment from people who looked like me. So the people I was going to lean on were the people who were pushing me away. And by the way, I know that their intentions were paved with nothing but goodness. They wanted what was best for the next generation. They knew that when they came to this country in 1973, the only way to make a living was to be a doctor or an engineer. So why would you then move 10,000 miles away and then have your son fail trying to do something? And in Indian culture, being a television anchor is like you're trying to be a movie star. That's kind of how they think of it. It's old school, right? And so I was facing adversity from within. And so the very people who I thought should support me were making fun of me. I actually had aunties and uncles, as we call them, say, "What, are you a DJ out in Flint?" You know? And I said, "What's wrong with being a DJ? What if I was," right? And so I really minded that, and so I felt alone. And at the end, I always said to myself, "And here I am alone." I would say that to myself. So I couldn't lean on the people who looked like me. I had a speech impediment. I had a broken nose, and I couldn't speak properly, and I was shorter than the other kids. But I said, I'm going to be a television news anchor in the city of Detroit, the greatest news town that ever was. And so thanks to a lot of people and the surgery at U of M Motts that fixed my nose, and the miraculous growth spurt that happened in 1992, I was able to grow up. And when I grew up, I realized that this is the time to say, you know what, here I am alone, let's do this, let's figure this out. And so I went to Lansing, made $20,000 a year, went to Flint for 4 years, did the weather, shot my own stuff, anchored the news, did all of those great things, and I loved every moment of it. Making $20,000 a year or making what I make today, the energy that I have about doing the news is still just as exciting. I'll remember when I was in Lansing, I put an earpiece in Hazlitt, Michigan, and there was a house fire. It was the first time I ever went live in my life. And I'll never forget the feeling. And did you know that I still have that feeling when the da-na-na-na, the news comes on, and they go, in 3, 2, and they point at me? I still have that feeling like I was 19 years old in Lansing doing the news there. Because I'll tell you what, it's the same feeling. The pay changes, the scale changes, more people watch, thank goodness. But Lansing, Flint, New Orleans, Detroit, it doesn't matter. Communication, following your dream, and knowing that in the end, you are just alone. And that's how I feel when I'm in the studio. I don't feel the presence of my ancestors. I don't feel the presence of anything but an audience in front of me. And I am alone. And there's something about being alone that we marginalize in our society. Being alone is bad. Being alone is where I found my most solace and my most strength. I couldn't lean on the Indian American people. I couldn't lean on my cousins. I couldn't lean on my brother, who, by the way, didn't do me any favors by going to MIT, getting a 5.0 and graduating in 3 years. And then there's Roop, right? The DJ in Flint. And so I knew that being alone and literally saying, and here I am again alone, that's just a line I tell myself all the time. And every time I anchor the news, I think to myself, here I am alone. Because my purpose and your purpose in this life is to shine with the greatest light that you have inside of you. It is not about what spotlights are around you and what other people are putting on you in terms of flashlights, spotlights, or any kind of a ray of hope. That has to come from within. Whether you have a speech impediment, whether you have people telling you can't do it, you can't make it, you have to figure out a way to do it on your own. And by the way, I lean on my elders, the people here who've been around this earth longer than me, maybe by just a few years. And I lean on them because their stories of facing adversity and feeling alone, those moments of strength, my goodness. You know, I had the pleasure of having one of our viewers be Aretha Franklin. And I'll never forget, she emailed me out of the blue saying, I really enjoy your work, young man. Keep it up and come to my Christmas party. And I was like, what? Aretha Franklin? And he was like, she likes Fox too. She likes Fox too. Go to the party. She's like, I don't care what you're doing. You go to the party. You take a day off. You go to the party. I went to the party, and I showed up an hour early by mistake. So I show up, and Aretha Franklin is sitting at a table just like that, counting money. She was counting money to pay the caterers and pay the, right? She's old school. And I had the best 2-minute conversation that I'm so blessed to have had with Aretha Franklin. And all she said to me is, I remember when you first got here to Detroit, you were kind of shy. And I see you coming out of your shell now. This is probably 7 years ago. And she says, keep doing that. She goes, because in the end, when you're on stage, young man, she's like, you are alone. And I was like, whoa, like this is exactly what I was feeling my whole life. And I said to her, I said, Miss Franklin, thank you for saying that, because honestly, that's how I feel when I'm on stage. She was like, baby, that's what it is, you alone. And I was like, I'm alone, you're right. So Aretha Franklin, who went through a lifetime of adversity and abuse and toughness and difficulties and a road that was not paved with convenience. She was a trailblazer. She knew that you had to be alone. And so I started talking to other people 7 years ago. Successful people. Huel Perkins grew up not being able to check out a library book in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, wanted to be a news anchor. He drops out of law school, gets hired in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. His dad becomes the vice chancellor of LSU, the school that said that his dad couldn't even go to school there when he was an undergrad, and he became the vice chancellor there. So Huel Perkins, I said, what is it? He goes, you got to do it on your own. On your own. There it is again. And there you are alone, right? And so then finally, my final chapter of this journey takes us to New Orleans, Louisiana in 2002. 6 months after 9/11, The NBC station in New Orleans decided to hire a 25-year-old kid from Flint, Michigan named Roop Raj. 6 months after 9/11, a jet black-haired 25-year-old boy with brown skin in the deepest part of the South you could possibly go. And so I asked my agent, Rick Ramage out of New York, I said, we have an offer from Milwaukee and we have an offer from New Orleans. What do we do? And he says, well, you have a choice. You can either go down south, try it out, don't unpack a box or a bag, see how it works out, and really have a really fun, challenging time, or you can go to Milwaukee because it's easy. Because you worked in Lansing, you worked in Flint, you know the Midwest mentality. You go be a weekend anchor in Milwaukee. Ultimately, you want to go back to Detroit. Detroit hires out of Milwaukee, New Orleans, out of everywhere. And so I looked at my dad, and he looked at me, and he said, son, I know you want to go to Milwaukee because it's the easy thing to do. He said, I moved 10,000 miles away, not with your mom. We didn't have enough money for her to come, so I sold all of our furniture in India, got enough money from his paycheck, taking a bus to go to work every day, so that he could buy an air ticket so my mom could come from India to America and become an American citizen. He says, if we did all of that, don't do what's easy. He says, you're gonna feel alone when you're down there. And there it was again. You're gonna feel alone when you go down there. And boy, did I feel alone. Within 2 months of being on the air in New Orleans, Louisiana, they had a TV-focused magazine. It was like a TV guide that came in the newspaper every Sunday. And New Orleans is like Detroit, a mini Detroit. They love their news anchors. And they said, where is this guy from? The axis of evil? The axis of evil. 6 months after 9/11. Where did they get this guy from? I had no idea that Troy, Michigan was part of the axis of evil until I moved there. They literally thought they would call me terrorist. They had advertisers that actually pulled their advertising. One of the biggest clothing stores in New Orleans said, we're not advertising on that morning show with that guy. Guys, I mean, I grew up in America. My parents are, and the sick irony of racism, I will say, the sick irony of racism, there's so many of them. But one of the most disgusting parts of it, that national anthem you just saw, that those beautiful sisters, where are they? Oh, there they are. So gorgeous. Give them a hand again. You were just absolutely stunning. You're beautiful inside and out. Your voices, your energy. My mom still stands when the national anthem comes on during a sporting event in her home in Rochester, Michigan. And when my friends, white and black, would come over to the house, they would make fun of her for standing up. Does she know she's not at the ballpark? She doesn't have to stand up. My dad takes his cap off. This is how much they love this country. And this is how hard they work to be here. And you know the stories of so many people, just like you and your great-grandparents and grandparents, they all came here with the same dream. It's no different. We just look different. But everyone looked different. Italians, Polish, Czech, everyone came from different places. And so my dad says, just do it. So I did it, and I stayed there alone, and I didn't unpack a box or a bag, and I told my agent, I don't think this is working out. And Huel Perkins, who's from Baton Rouge, Louisiana, came in for Christmas one year to go visit his family. He flew into New Orleans. He goes, are you doing the show? I said, yeah, and I had known Huel since I was 14 years old. He was one of the first guests on a TV talk show I did in Troy. So I said, Huel, I don't know, I'd love to see you. I don't know what you can help me with. So he shows up and sits in the studio with me as I'm anchoring the morning show. And during a commercial break, he gives me a big, hearty hug and a handshake, and he goes, you should be so proud of yourself. You're in New Orleans, Louisiana, 6 months after 9/11, and you're standing in your own power. You're anchoring the news. You're doing what you got to do. You'll make it to Detroit. You know? You'll make it to Detroit. And thank you. And it was because of that inspiration that helped me get here. And so, yes, I don't say that I do it alone when I say I stand here alone. I did it because of a lot of support and a lot of help. But ultimately, that feeling of being alone, instead of looking at it as a negative, I look at it as a path through adversity. That's how you get through it, is knowing that I can do it alone with the help that I have, my community, whoever you have around you. Of course, those people are strength. But ultimately, when you sit in that chair, whether it be an anchor chair or an executive chair, or you sit in a UPS truck and get that new job and you're the delivery guy, or whatever that job is, like my father-in-law, Mr. Larry in New Orleans, who carried the mail for 46 years in New Orleans, he said the same thing. First day on the job, you sit in that mail truck and it's on, you know? Whatever job we have, we're supported by our community, our pillars, but ultimately when we perform, we're alone. And so my advice, which I feel so shy in even saying that because there's so many wise people in this room, both young and older alike. Notice when I say older, I look up because I don't want to look at anyone when I say the word older. I learned that in speaking years ago. If you ever say young and old alike, don't say young and old alike. You know, you don't do that. Not a good thing. But when I think about the young and the old alike, I often think about their stories. I think about your stories. And one of the greatest gifts, I'll end with this, of being a television news anchor, and I mean this from the bottom of my heart, and I seriously get emotional thinking about it. To stand here today and to be anchoring the news in this great city, in this great community, is the biggest gift of my life. It's the biggest gift of my life. There's no greater gift than being in Detroit and anchoring the news every single night. There really isn't. And so, but always remember, I'll never forget and always remember that when you come to cities like Westland, when I was reporting, I used to do, when Al Allen retired years ago, they put me out in the streets and I did Al's shift. And that's where I got to know my people. Because I was out on the streets every single morning on it, from the traffic accident to this to that, and I was just out and about. My lunch breaks were at the nearest gas station, and then you get to know people there. And it was such a wonderful thing. But the thing that I've learned is that I'm not here to impart any wisdom on you. We're here to learn from each other. That's what Detroiters do. And that's what we're doing here today. So I hope to learn more about your stories and say hi to you as well. But I want to open it up for some questions. I first want to say thank you very much for bestowing the honor of being in the great city of Westland here. Mr. Mayor and all of you, thank you for having me here today. It's such a pleasure and such an honor. So I know we have questions, right?
So Roop would take questions. If you want to ask a question, please raise your hand and I'll give you the mic.
First one's always the toughest. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, the mayor is taking the lead.
Just curious, why news? Why'd you want to go into the news business? What caught your...
Detroiters are a nosy bunch. We all want to know what's going on, right? I mean, it's in the water, I guess, when you grow up in this town. But I was never quite... I never got nervous in front of a crowd. As a little boy, I did imitations of presidents and people at family get-togethers. I was always in front of the stage. And I'm not good at anything else, Mr. Mayor. I'm not good at anything else. I really am not. I'm a terrible... I was the only Indian kid that was awful at math and science. So those were gone. I couldn't do that. Politics, I'm not polished enough like you and some others, but I didn't know what else to do. Honestly, I love communicating and I love people, and I truly do love people. Like doing this kind of thing is actually as fun for me as anchoring the news. I don't get to see you on the other side of the camera when I'm anchoring the 5 or 10 o'clock news, and now I get to see you. So it's like, for me, it's just a pleasure. I just love it. Maybe it's something in just a bug that bit me early on. Good question.
Oh, hi.
Oh,
I've got the mic.
And then, I didn't.
Just kidding. You want to take
No, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Oh, okay.
Please, and then we'll come right to.
Sorry, yeah. Hi, so I'm Daryl Beebe. I'm over college and career readiness in Wayne Westland Community Schools. But I have a question for you. My wife has always wanted to be a news personality, and obviously she's ending her career as an educator. What do you say to someone who is still interested in your profession, and what should they do? And then also for our students who are interested in communications, what would you recommend for them as well?
So the world is changing, as we know, pretty quickly. Every industry has seen transitions. Television is seeing a tremendous transition where we have a large number of people who still watch television, like the way we remember, right? But we have an app called Fox Local, and we thought, okay, we'll introduce it, a soft launch. We don't go crazy with it, but we'll put it out there, and maybe people who are streaming Netflix and Amazon at 10 o'clock will say, you know what, I want to know what happened with the news. I want my sense of community, and they'll click on it, we thought. We are shocked by the numbers. This is transitioning quickly into streaming. So now people are streaming, and they're not watching the news on their phones. They're still watching it on their connected TVs. On Tubi or Apple TV, you can get the Fox Local app, and then they hit it, and we're noticing these weird, awesome numbers where all of a sudden, we'll get in one particular, I probably shouldn't even say the numbers are proprietary, but something like crazy number of million unique minutes viewed in 1 month. It was like some crazy number, and you can see where they're streaming from and what the audience is, what the age demo is. And so we're noticing our older audience, they're still watching us on television, say older, including me, I'm 47, right? So, but our 20 and 30-year-olds are streaming us. And the people who care about local news are people who ultimately have an investment in a community. The problem is people are young people don't watch the news. They never did. Because if you're not paying taxes, what do you care about elections or anything, right? But the world, it's so important now. If you don't mind me saying, I think it's really important that we pay attention to the news more than ever before. Because if you are depending on your phone and Facebook and TikTok to get information, I'm going to give you some breaking news that's not so breaking. It's fake news. A lot of it is fake news. They literally come up with articles that look like real articles and put them out there, and then people spread it like wildfire, and it's false information. Journalists and people think that we just show up and we say, oh, I heard this happened today. No, we check with 3 independent sources, even nationally. So if Donald Trump or Joe Biden, the president, say something, we go check with 3 local organizations to see if that's true, that that money actually is going to the state the way they say it is. Mm-hmm. The grant money in Michigan, we've already helped build 16,000-mile lanes of roads. And so, yeah, you better believe the infrastructure money is hitting the roads. Next question. I'm writing that down, and I'm like literally like Michigan.gov roads. I'm hitting that person up. I'm hitting a local road department. I'm hitting, hey, have you gotten the money? Did we have grant money? So if you have a deep interest in knowing what's happening and you really care deeply about it, there are ways to enter the business, starting with an internship. That's the most important thing, more than a degree. And I hate to say that, but it's true, more than a degree. We have people who are working in our newsroom who don't have college degrees, but went to college, but got internships early and got promoted within, and now they're doing excellent work, and they're some of our smartest guys and gals.
This question has no reflection on you, but I wish
Never ends well. This never ends well.
whoever did the inviting of us here today should have every 3rd grade child in Michigan here to hear what you had to say. Oh. And I would like to hear you say it again. I was blessed to go to a church where we had an Indian couple. They were from Sri Lanka. This was in Detroit. And I thought they were the prettiest people I'd ever seen. So your brown color is beautiful.
Oh, you too.
Now,
you too. Thank you.
The question is, what can we do to get you into our schools so these little 3rd grade children or 1st or kindergarten kids can learn to appreciate themselves where they are and to accept themselves where they are?
Well, that is a beautiful question. I thank you for your question. When I was 14, I showed up, I was 12, I showed up at Channel 2 and saw Hewell Perkins and Sherry Margolis anchoring the news in the studio that I now sit in. Showing up at a place and feeling the energy of the place can inspire you to break through barriers and run through roadblocks that you've never thought you could run through. That's what happened to me. I invite tour groups to come to the station, get a bus together, have a teacher, enough chaperones, and let's make it happen. Bring them over. Well, they can come watch the 5 o'clock news in the summer. They can watch 6 o'clock news, and maybe they'll get inspired by something else there. They'll say, maybe I want to be a writer or a producer, or maybe I like the buzz of the newsroom. Maybe they could just hear a story from a guy who had a broken nose and big glasses and a funny voice and a funny name, by the way. Roop rhymes with a lot of things. You're in 3rd grade. I like the name now, Mom and Dad, but man, that was rough. So if you have those adversities that you face, maybe they see someone who actually, I look to Hewell. I look to Hewell because Hewell, although he was always a handsome, stellar guy in terms of how he showed up, his story of adversity was always right there, and he wears it on his sleeve. So I learned from him, and maybe other people can humbly learn from me. So I'll welcome them. I'll welcome them in.
Hi there, how are you? I watch you on Channel 2, too. So and I've learned some things from you today, is my path. We all have a path of life, the diversity. I'm living in diversity today, training people, training police departments, training the fire department, making sure that people are being treated and with respect. I'm really big about the respect here. I'm also a peer mentor, and my walk of life was my dreams, not to be a dishwasher, no way. My dream was to be a speaker and giving hope to others. Thank you.
Well, you're doing it right now. I can tell. You have conviction in your voice and you care deeply. That's awesome. Thank you for sharing. And don't forget, when you fill out that sheet, just be nice. It's okay. You don't have to. You thought I never did as well in school as I should have. So give me some high marks here today, huh? No, I'm kidding.
Thank you so much for being here. This was lovely. I'm so curious about your departure from New Orleans, and did it get any easier for you until you were hired into Detroit, or was there any pivotal story or moment that the community embraced you?
Oh, that's wonderful. Hurricane Katrina changed everything in New Orleans. There was no social media in 2005. People were displaced from their homes and didn't know where their family members were. They didn't know where to get food, they didn't know where to get water, and they were trapped in their homes. Some of them obviously didn't make it. Many people went to Baton Rouge. They drove for hours to go to Houston or Baton Rouge or other places, Shreveport, Lafayette, Louisiana, and they rode out the storm. And our station commandeered, sounds weird, but they literally took over random TV stations in all these markets where they knew the evacuees were, and we would flash pictures of their family members, very similar to 9/11, and say, Larry Spoils is sitting here in Baton Rouge at shelter number 8. Call this number if you want to find your grandma, your grandpa, your children. When I was in that chair, I sat there for 17 and a half hours straight anchoring the news. From 4 a.m. straight through the night until we shut the station down because the storm surge was so strong that we had to take cover. And that's when the melee broke out and things were on fire and people were shooting each other on the streets. There was martial law and we were walking to the Superdome going, that's a safe place to go. Yeah, and it was bad. And bottom line, that's when New Orleanians were like, this guy literally sat there wearing the same shirt for 18 hours telling us where I can find my mom and my dad, where I can get food and water, how I can find safety and hope at a really hopeless time. Their world ended that day for many people. And the rest of the country on August 29, 2005, you went to work and heard about it on the news that night and said, isn't that terrible? And watched MSNBC or Fox and you saw it on there, but it wasn't the same when you're living it. Their world ended, it was decimated. And in that moment, there is something like that only Detroiters would identify, rising from the ashes. New Orleans did the same thing. There's a resilient people. So I think they got to know me through that. And after that, they didn't want me to leave. And they made me the Grand Marshal of a Mardi Gras parade, the St. Patrick's Day parade, the first non-Irish guy, Roop Raj, to be at the, and they loved me, and I loved them. But Detroit called, and when Detroit called, it was time. I will say the biggest challenge that I faced, this is an interesting one, people, again, racism is an ugly thing. But I'll get emails here and there, which is fine. We got 5 million people in our viewing area. You're going to get some people who are mad at you just for existing, and that's fine too. I'm not going away. But they said, Mike, you got the job because you're an Indian guy. So the people who hire people for the last 40 years in television have been white males. Those are the executives who are hiring what the news should look like. And they finally got around to saying maybe we should have a lead black man, Huel Perkins, be the lead anchor man, right? And he's just as competent as any white person, if not, and then we'll have diversity within. But the only minorities that television executives honored for a long time were minority females. And this is really bad. And you'll have to follow me because if you read this the wrong way, you're gonna think I'm being sexist. I'm not saying they're talented and everything, but they were hiring them based on their looks. They were exotic. So these Indian and Asian women were showing up on TV all through the 90s and say, oh, look what we got. We have diversity. We're diverse. Meantime, I applied for jobs all across the country for years, and because when you have an agent, they can tell the truth. When they talk to me, they have to treat me like a candidate. They can't say things that are illegal or that could get them in trouble. But when they call my agent and they said, Rick, and this is a boss here in Detroit, I won't say which station, but years ago, he's no longer there. But he said to my agent, he said, Rick, people don't see Indian men in positions of power. They're the behind the scenes guys. You can't have him as an anchor man. I mean, he's not really an anchor. And he pointed out TV shows, sitcoms, and he's not wrong. The sitcoms depict Indian men as, I can't talk to a woman unless I have a drink. Raj Kutrapali in The Big Bang Theory. Back in the 90s, they were showing Indian men owning the party stores, which there's nothing wrong with that, but they were exploiting their accents. David Letterman did it every week. Mujibur and Sirajul, these two guys from Gujarat, India, came to try to start a better life, just like Polish people and Czech people and Italian people in the 40s. No different, but he exploited the hell out of them. And so what do people think? They go, and then they do a show called ER, and there's not one Indian doctor. Have you been to Beaumont? Like, are you kidding me? Like, there was such a lack of an understanding of diversity, so these white executives were saying, no, my newscast, black man, white woman, couple here, a couple here, but that's it. That's the world, according to a white man in 1992. Well, guess what? The world didn't look like that. And there's guys like me who are scratching at the bit to get to a spot, and I can thank the diversity and leadership and the understanding and the change that we've seen in our world for the better that allows people like your old colleague Ranjiv Puri and others who are young men to get into politics and be representing a community. We all deserve a voice. This is America. This is not some, right? This is where we live. This is like all of us live here. My mom and dad deserve it too, and they deserve to see their son on television the same way a white parent deserves to see their daughter on TV, and a black parent. So it's an interesting thing. But the road, listen, I think people's intentions aren't always bad. I think people just don't know. And I think that instead of calling people names and saying, oh, they don't understand, they're just those racist people, like, try to help educate. And that's one thing I try to do. I go into primarily like very white conservative communities, and I speak to their groups too, because I think it's important. Because if you're not going to sit down and break bread with people, then how are you being like any of your respected religious icons in your life that we all worship and respect? If you want to be more like that person, what does that look like? It means showing up, right? And so I hate it when people say, oh, that area, you go up north and then those people. Are you kidding me? If someone wears a red and white hat and says they like Donald Trump, I want to have coffee with them. Why not? They're American, I'm American. And that's the decency and civility that this country was built on, I thought, right? We can disagree. Newt Gingrich and Bill Clinton, Tip O'Neill and Ronald Reagan. I mean, these people do not like each other and are sitting down. And by the way, I want to say one last thing. I went to the White House a month ago, and the national media is not doing you any favors. I'm sorry to say it. They show nothing but the division. When I was sitting at the White House for 9.5 hours, I was right where, the shot where you see the reporters? That's an area called Pebble Beach. So we all have offices, we're all hanging out there. And I was there the whole day, and I see 3 SUVs come in every few minutes. And it's Speaker Johnson, the Republican conservative guy who's coming to meet with Biden the day of the State of the Union address. And so finally I stopped his PR guy. I said, why is Speaker Johnson coming here the day of the State of the Union 3 times? He goes, oh, they're working on a bipartisan bill together, a package of bills that they want to pass. And so I said, why don't we hear about that on MSNBC or Fox News? And they said, because they don't want to hear about it. We send them releases all the time, and they said, you can come on if you want to talk about how much you hate this other person, but we're not talking about your bipartisan bill. It's boring. Think about that. And then I went and talked to Steve Scalise. You know who Steve Scalise is? He was the majority whip. I've known him since my days in New Orleans. I've known him for almost 25 years. So I have a cell phone. I said, hey, I'm in Washington. I'd like to interview you. Sure, come on over. He goes, where did you come from? I go, I just finished interviewing Debbie Dingell. He goes, oh, I love Debbie. She just sent me the nicest card, but I'm going through chemo. She's such a sweetheart. And we were working on a bill together. I said, how come no one's here? So I called Debbie. I said, Debbie, no one's talking about it. She's like, we talk about it all the time. You guys don't cover it. The media has a tremendous responsibility in telling the truth. And the truth isn't just telling you what happened. It's looking to what things are happening that you're not covering and putting it on the news so that people know this country's not as divided as we think it is. I'm sorry, I believe that from my core. I do.
So it's already been stated that you have a powerful story and that more people need to hear it. So the question is there a documentary or film in process? And if not, I know a guy, 2-time award-winning documentary film producer. I just want to,
You're so kind. I'll do these forever and a day. I love coming into communities and by the way, the food was delicious. So if you want to feed me any time, I'll come over. The eating food and hanging with people. I like the small stage. It's nice. Detroit is the smallest big city in the world. So when I go out in the community and, I was at the UPS store before I came here and a lady came up and hugged me and said, I watched you grow on TV and I love you. And I said, I love you back. And she was like, what? And I said, thank you. If it wasn't for you, I wouldn't have a job, But thank you. That's very kind of you. But I'm not that interesting. But I thank you so much. You're very kind for saying that.
I hope this is not too confusing, but all the struggles and everything that you've been through, what would you tell your younger self now on how to get to where you are now?
It's okay to be alone.
All right.
It's okay to be alone. I struggled with it because I told you there I was alone, right? Every time from speech therapy all the way to facing adversity, I think just being comfortable being alone. And also another thing I've learned from my wife, who by the way is from New Orleans. So people said, you miss New Orleans? I go home to New Orleans every night. Her mom grew up in the Ninth Ward. Trust me, Julie is very New Orleans. And she loves Detroit. We've been here 15 years, but she's a mental health therapist. And whenever I feel sad or angry or upset, people always say, my buddies are like, dude, that must suck. You're married to a mental health therapist, like a marriage therapist. Like, I feel badly for you. And I'm like, no, it's a blessing because she actually understands if I get quiet or angry or irritable, instead of being like, what's wrong with you? She knows what's wrong. And she gives me my space. And I do the same for her. One thing she taught me years ago when I was dating her, like 20 years ago, was that when you feel pain, anger, sadness, we marginalize those feelings so much. And if you look at Facebook and Instagram, it's gratitude this, gratitude that. Listen, I'm all for it. You have to be grateful from your core. I agree 100%. Do not mistake me. But with that gratitude can come pain, anger, sadness, disappointment, jealousy. Things that are normal human emotions that we marginalize and shrink, and we make them less important than the happiness and the joy. So unless you're elated all the time and grateful, you're sitting at the hospital, and yes, you should say, I'm glad at least I'm alive. Of course, that's gratefulness, gratitude. We should have that, and that's the core. But I'm just saying, what I've learned from her is that maybe it's okay to be sad. It's okay to feel alone. It's okay to have a bad day. So Julie's rule is, if I'm having a bad day, don't send me flowers. Let me feel it all the way through. Give me flowers the next day, but let me feel sad today. Don't try to fix it. And I think that that's something that's a wisdom there that I learned that maybe I could pass along, or she could pass along. He's like Phil Donahue. You're running with the mic.
Busted, like a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old.
Oh,
Jesus.
I'm sure.
Anyway, I kind of want to go back and just thank you. I thought I had a really loud voice to begin with. And thank you for saying those things about DC. I was a lobbyist for over a decade in DC, and we worked things that never got brought up, obviously, and we worked hand in hand with R's and D's. You had to, right, in order to get things passed and things like that. And a majority of legislation is not brought up to the public. And man, the best friends were Inouye and Stevens from Hawaii and Alaska. They were best friends, R's and D's.
Yeah.
And I don't think people realize that. I think it's a little less than what it used to be.
Yeah.
But the old school members are still friends. So how are you kind of as the media, because a lot of it, as you said, is, it's a point and click. We as citizens are our worst enemy. And we're kind of disturbing the traditional media, and we're creating the fake news, and we're perpetuating it. So how are you guys in the media industry trying to curb that and really show us the truth without a biased approach?
It's a great question, and a loaded one that's important. I think, here's the deal. We don't have bosses at Channel 2, and I will speak for 4 and 7. I don't mind. I know Devin at Channel 4. He's a good man. He's a good guy. I know the bosses. I've interviewed at all 3 stations. I know them. Local media, we're lucky in Detroit. More people are turning to local news than we've seen in many years. And I think the reason is because of that disappointment and that feeling disenfranchised from the truth. And I think the bottom line is we have a tremendous responsibility when you put a microphone on, that the words that you're about to speak are true. I always tell my newsroom, be last, but be true. Be last. I don't want to be the first on TV with anything. I hope we're last. I don't care if we're last or in the middle. Who cares? What a 1985 model of doing the news. If it bleeds, it leads. We were first on the scene. Who cares? Did you get it right? Because that's what I care about. I'd wait 5 minutes for the truth. You? And so for me, the responsibility is something I feel exhaustingly. Like, I literally look at every script when I'm anchoring the news at 5, and I ask, is this true? It's the question I ask every single time I read any words. Is it true? Is it true? Is that, Whitmer said that, but what's the truth about it? We should question everything all the time. And we should question Democrats and Republicans. And we should question people who've been vilified before and who've been glorified now. We have to question everything. And I think the thing that's different about local news is we don't have this pressure. I don't work at the network. I don't work at any network. So I have friends who work at I know Hoda Copy's a friend of mine. But she's doing like a talk show on Today's Show, right? So she's not really doing the news. I don't know what pressures they face. I don't know what lobby, I don't know what's going on. But I can tell you that Channel 2, Channel 4, and Channel 7 do not have bosses saying, before you go out on the story, this is the way we want it to look. It just doesn't happen. It's just not happening. It doesn't happen. So like when I go to Lansing to go interview a politician, or if the governor comes to Channel 2, or Dana Nessel texts me and says, hey, I'm about to do a news conference about this bad guy or this good gal or whatever's going on, I still question her, right? Just because you have a position doesn't make what you're going to say true. And so I'm always questioning everything. And I think, I'll just leave you with this. My boss, yesterday I had a conversation with him, my general manager, the president of Channel 2. And he called me in the office to talk about some other stuff. And I was talking about ratings. And I said, well, what about Let It Rip numbers? How are the numbers for Let It Rip, which is the show we do every Thursday? And he says, Roop, I don't know how to tell you this. I don't care. And I said, what? Like, I've been in the business almost 30 years. I'm like, what do you mean you don't care? He's like, they're fine. The numbers are fine. I'm not looking at daily like, oh, yesterday we did this story, so our ratings went here. And then today, if we do this story, maybe we'll do more of that and clicks, we'll get more clicks. It just doesn't work that way for us because we're not making, Gardner White Furniture knows that Channel 2's numbers fluctuate because people are busy. Summertime, our numbers go down at 5 o'clock. Why? Because the kids are all outside playing and you're out to dinner with your friends. So what are we going to change the way we do the news because fewer people are watching? We have the luxury of having a really healthy viewership at our station. The good thing about working at a #1 station, you don't have to worry. The numbers go down a little bit, they go up a little bit, they go down. I mean, could you imagine if a car salesman was reactive all the time? You know, we ordered 16 of those cars and we've only moved 4 of them. The car sucks. Like, no, it's not the way it works. It's like you got to see the whole broad picture in the audience. So my boss looked at me square in the eye and said, don't worry about it. Don't worry about the numbers. Don't look at them. Just keep doing your job. Our job is to do a good job. And he goes, over the course of many months, they gain trust. People are sampling Channel 2. Let's say they didn't like something that Channel 4 said, and they go, I'm gonna watch Channel 2 for a minute. They're gonna sample you for maybe 2 days, 3 days. Do the best job. Tell them the truth. Be real. And one thing I will say about Channel 2 that does separate us from our competition, what you see is what you get. No one's acting. And I'm not saying people are acting on the other stations. I'm just saying our station is, they interview people and you have to like, if you don't like carrots at a cooking segment, you have to say you don't like carrots. If you don't play the Powerball, don't say you do. Now, this whole ho-hum, that's right, guys, it's time for the Powerball and good luck, everybody. You know, like, it's this fake, pretentious news anchor from the 1990s, gone. Detroit is about grit and real. And people, whether they have a PhD or a GED, they know when you're telling the truth. That's how smart Detroiters are. That's Westland, all this area, they know.
So Roop would take one more question and we will have the Davis twin sisters give us a song and then our good friend Derek will give closing remarks. So one last question. Who's up for it? No hands up?
They're like, God, his answers are so long. I don't want to be here for 3 hours. I can take a little criticism.
Okay,
Take the heat.
she wants to go a second time. An encore.
No. I just want to know, what do you think of the Detroit sign, the new Detroit sign?
Tell the truth. I like it at night, and I like to drive by it. That's it. You can read between the lines. I mean, if you're staring at it, and it's green, and it's sitting in front of you, it looks, yeah. I'll pull a Larry David. So, but it looks good when you drive by. I will say we drove by, and at night, it's meant to be driven by for the people coming from the airport that they're coming to Detroit. It's not meant to be like, let's go stare at the sign. And by the way, Hollywood, Google it. I want you to know this. Google Hollywood sign close up. It's awful. So the Hollywood sign's supposed to be seen from far away too. So look, I'm not a mouthpiece for the city. I criticize them plenty, but I'm telling you, I think that they're just trying to do something nice to spruce it up. By the way, the People Mover, they got these lights coming up on the People Mover. They opened up a roller skating thing today in Detroit in time for the draft. And all these people say, oh, well, that's not good. They did this just for the draft. When big events happen, listen, I lived in New Orleans where they hosted more Super Bowls than any other city. When you have events come to a city, it improves the city for good. So it's a good thing. So don't say it's just for the draft. It's for all Detroiters to enjoy all the time. But thank you for having me. I really do mean this. It was such a tremendous pleasure and honor to be with you. Thank you, and please be in touch.
A round of applause. Now, I just want to bring to our attention that they came via this 91-year-old woman here and my assistant, Nicole, made all the connections. So, I know how to work with women, They help, they make things happen. So I'm glad that it was a last-minute arrangement, but we can tell it all worked out well. And just before I call on my friend and DEI Commissioner Derek Davis to come on stage and give the closing remarks, I just want to say that when we went public with our choice, our invitation to Roop, I had a lot of feedback, a lot of emails and text messages, and people were inboxing me on Facebook. And I one said, Roop is a phenomenal speaker, and she's here. Another said, how did you get him to come here? He goes to, I never knew you only went to big establishments, big corporations and all that. But here we are, small operation, but you decided to come and share your experiences with us. And I hope that we can call on you again and you can come and join us. On that note, please do join me as I invite my friend and DEI Commissioner Derek Davis to give his closing remarks. Derek.
Well, I'm certainly glad he came back up after that. I don't think I could have followed that. Wow. Thank you. That was... Honestly, thanks to all of you for showing up. I see quite a few familiar faces, but, I see a lot of new faces, and I see a lot more people here for our lunchtime conversations. And before I get into thanking everybody, that comes in, all of the, Roop, the mayor, diversity, equity, and inclusion department, thanks to you. We wouldn't have these lunchtime conversations if you didn't RSVP for them. We wouldn't have the ability to continue to get such wonderful speakers to come in if you didn't show up to support us for this. So thank you. Thanks to you for coming. Thank you. I think we all deserve a round of applause for that, right? Right. I don't want to keep everybody too late, so I'm just going to say thanks again. I watched your TED Talk, and personally, and I'm just going to leave it with this, my favorite nickname of yours is Roop. There it is. So I just want to let you know. And I do encourage you to watch. He's got quite a few videos online, and the TED Talk that he gave in Detroit, which talking about his time in New Orleans, honestly was amazing. You know, I mean, it is truth to be said that his speaking ability, as well as to relay information about understanding adversity, understanding rejection, everything like that is wonderful. We have these wonderful, surveys that we'd like you to fill out. You can see them at your tables. Please fill them out. We can only get better if you choose, if you leave these comments. Like he said, be nice. Thanks. I'm going to leave you with a couple of things. Some of you may well know that community and connection are a huge part of what I believe in. I believe that we cannot be a community unless we connect the dots of each other. And we cannot be a community without connection. So when you're all done with this, before you bounce back out to your cars for the rest of your days and forget everything like that, talk to the people that are in this room. Because this community is what's going to make the city great. We are already great. We are only going to get greater. But we can't continue to grow if we don't have the connections. Like roots in a city of a foundation, those connections build togetherness. And building togetherness builds community. And building a community creates a top-notch city. And I don't know about you, I live here, and I want this to be a top-notch city. So I'm going to leave you at that. Thank you so much for coming out here today. Thanks again, Mr. Mayor Coleman, Chief. I mean, once again, we put on. And make sure that the next time you get emails, phone calls, I don't know, solicits, knocks on your door for the next lunchtime conversation, do join us. Tell your friends, tell your family, tell everybody. We'll see you till the next time. Have a great day, everybody.